Before we get started, I'm calling to order. We have a lot of people here tonight, and some of you have already taken the cue and picked up a speaker card. If you plan on speaking, I would urge you to get a speaker card now, because I will not be taking them all night long. If you have some inspiration at 6 o'clock you want to speak, I'm not going to take it. So they're back here at the post, and now's an opportunity for citizens to make comments on items that are not on the agenda, and I have no speakers cards for that. So we're going to go ahead and move on into item number 1, which is presentation status report from Colonel Derek Thompson, 1st Brigade of the 101st Airborne Division, Air Assault of Fort Campbell, upon the unit's return from Baghdad, Iraq, and also maybe an introduction. So, Colonel Thompson, Colonel Bourne, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll stand over here so I can kind of look at both y'all here.
If you, why don't you just go to the podium then?
Okay.
Yeah, and
Does that work?
sure.
All right. Again, I appreciate the opportunity just to say a few words and to say hello and greetings from Fort Campbell. We, as the mayor said, we just got back from Iraq and Syria about a month ago. I command about 4,400 soldier brigade. We were deployed there from about January, really through the end of September, first part of October, and just now getting back on ground and getting reintegrated back at Fort Campbell. And wanted to be able to just give a quick status report what we've been up to. We've kind of been officially adopted by the city of Franklin, by city proclamation about 2.5, 3 years ago now. And so we've really had, it's been such an honor to be associated with the community of Franklin. And so again, it's my honor to be able to provide just a brief couple of comments on what we've been up to here lately. Our primary mission in Iraq and Syria has been, as you can imagine, the fight against ISIS. That has been first and foremost what's been kind of on our plate and the reason why we were over there. It's been going on really since 2014 when we first started major operations against ISIS. And if you recall, when all that started, it's a very unique type of threat in that this was a non-nation state actor who owned terrain. They owned a large part of Syria, a large part of Iraq, and they were acting almost as a state actor. And so what our role in this whole fight has been is to help those that own that ground to fight ISIS in a very kind of almost conventional type of fight of one side against another. First with the Iraqi army and the Iraqi side, and then with our Kurdish and Arab partners in the Syrian side. And for the last, again, almost 4.5 years, it has involved a lot of us leveraging our enabling functions, the things that we bring to the table that we do better than anyone else in the world, and that's our intelligence and what we call our fires, which is those that deliver bombs or artillery, those things that strike. And so we've been able to bring that together to assist our partners to defeat ISIS. And so the last 4.5 years, it's been a steady campaign of shrinking this piece of ground that they own to make it go away, to destroy it. And when we came on the scene in January, after we've been at this for about 4 years, we're at the last final portion of the physical terrain that they owned in the small corner of Syria. And so when we arrived into Syria, that's the state in which they were in. And it was pretty remarkable for our forces to come in. We had a lot of special operations partners who were very forward helping our partners with this fight. But we had our 1st Brigade, 101st Artillery that we brought into position. And for about, from January through April, about the first 4 months we were on the ground, they fired over 3,200 rounds of artillery. That's a lot of shooting. That's a lot of artillery, a lot of work that our soldiers put into it. It's much more accurate than some of the artillery pieces that we see from the Battle of Franklin in the mid-1860s. I'm proud to report that we've made good advances in some of our weaponry with that. They'd really use it to a degree higher than anyone else in the U.S. Army is using it right now. The equipment that we're using nowadays is really the best in the world. For example, we have these little radar detectors that are right to the end of the artillery pieces. When the round shoots out, it automatically calculates where that round is going, so it can feed into the ballistic computer what it has to do for the next round to make sure it's exactly right. It takes into account the meteorological data the temperature, the humidity. It actually even accounts for the rotation of the earth in ensuring the gun is exactly right to hit exactly where it's supposed to hit. And so a lot of that was put into use. And then at the end of April is when we destroyed that last little bit of that physical terrain that ISIS held. Now we've transitioned into something more of a broader area fight where ISIS still remains kind of out there. They've been able to kind of hide and bleed off a lot of their folks. And so they're trying to gain some traction. They're trying to gain some momentum. But we remain in position. We remain there with our intelligence, with our drones, our unmanned aircraft we employ, a lot of our systems to find them. We use a lot of our aircraft support and fires to go get them. And of course, our Iraqi partners really do all the groundwork to get after them. So that's what we've been up to as a brigade. We're the only fighting force there in Iraq and Syria, aside from our special operations partners out there doing that business. And so the 1st Brigade, the 101st, has been very busy putting that kind of work against ISIS. And it was I don't know, it's an enemy that has a very twisted ideology that is very resilient. And so at this point in time, our kind of position is to stay the course, and we're just maintaining that pressure because pressure does matter. If we keep that pressure on the network, they are unable to regenerate, unable to grow back up again. And so that's really where we are at this point in time, is to keep that pressure on them and to really ensure that they're defeated in a lasting way. Also want to be able to talk a little bit about what we're up to in the brigade and what the Army's been up to here lately. As we come back from this deployment, one of the things the Army's really been focused on the last really couple years is being ready for whatever the next fight may be. The last 15 plus years have been very busy for the Army. We've been deployed a lot. But one of the things we've noticed about ourselves is that we've kind of changed a little bit about how we do business because the nature of Iraq and Afghanistan is very unique. The type of enemy is a very different type of enemy. And so we go to many fixed locations that are already established. And so we've developed some habits that are good for that fight, but we're looking at ourselves of what about the next fight? What could that next, we call the near peer competitor, look like? What could the worst thing that we could face look like? And so we've been doing a lot of soul searching to figure out, okay, how do we make sure we're ready for that? How do we make sure we're not just getting too comfortable with going to places that are well established, that have good communications, good logistics? We are trying to get back to making sure we're ready for that very austere fight. One of the things we talk a lot about is the character and the nature of war. There's a lot of things about the character of war that continue to change. Cyber is a big player now. The role of publicly available media. You can take a picture and it's instantly around the world on Twitter or Facebook instantly. That's not the kind of warfare we're used to fighting in. And so these kinds of developments, artificial intelligence, all these things play a role in changing the character of war. But there's a lot of things about the nature of war that will never change. It will always be a very gritty, tough, difficult environment that we have to train our soldiers for. And so we're kind of, doing a lot of that as with the weather coming in. It was a great environment as we did physical training with some of our company commanders in some of the coldest weather we could come up with here recently. It's a way to build some good grit and resilience because we know that's what the next fight is going to require of our soldiers. And so we're spending a lot of time trying to make sure we're ready for that next fight. And a lot of this, you hear a lot of stuff about the Army in modernization. Some of our advances have it's been a while since we developed some of our newer equipment, so we're kind of taking a hard look at that. And so that's been a big part of what our Army's up to, and we are certainly here as we look forward to the next steps here, trying to make sure we're ready for that next fight and taking that turn into it. So that's just a little bit about what we've been up to, a little bit about what's coming up in the future. I'd be happy to take any questions. If any questions about what we did in Iraq and Syria, what we have coming up. I don't want to take all the mayor's time. We've got a full agenda. But if there's one or two questions out there I can answer, I'm happy to do so if anyone has anything burning on their mind of what we're up to here. Any questions out there? Yes, ma'am.
Do you believe that the missions that you have been on have been mostly successful in accomplishing what our president and what the military higher-ups want us to accomplish?
I feel they've been very successful with that. One of the things we've had to really strike a balance of is, how do we accomplish our strategic objectives in a way that is acceptable to the citizenry whom we serve, to how we go about doing that becomes very important. We know we have to do this in a way that preserves our force. We're not in a position where we can afford to take, large casualties, that kind of thing. And so how we do this is important. I feel very comfortable with how we've been able to accomplish our mission of getting after ISIS, but doing it in a way that employs our capabilities without having our folks right there at that front line. It's not how we will always fight. Again, going back to the next fight's not going to be like that. But for this fight, we have an Iraqi partner that's capable, getting better by the day. But I feel very comfortable.
Are you able to employ robotics in that and robots in that at all to help you?
We are, man. We were able to employ certain robotics that can go into tough areas. If our partner's forward, we may bring a special operations team that can put something forward, an unmanned system that can, travel around and take a look at things. We are definitely, with our unmanned aircraft, is really a way we can get eyes overhead. We can take a look at the area around us and employ those systems to a high degree.
Thank you.
So, yes, ma'am.
Well, I'm going to interrupt just a second.
Yes, sir.
And for the audience, this has been a great relationship with the 101st and the 1st Brigade. And I applaud Colonel Thompson for thinking up the idea of Franklin Rendezvous, where for 2 years we've been able to take Franklin citizens to Fort Campbell and see the capabilities of our military. And Colonel Thompson's had a lot of other ideas that we're continuing to work on and explore. And tonight we have Colonel Bourne, who's going to be his replacement very soon.
That's right.
And we look forward to the same type of relationship that we've had with Colonel Thompson with you, Colonel Bourne.
Yes, sir.
And we do have something special for you. We know you're moving. You're going to England for about 4 months, and then you're going to be in Hawaii. And we don't want Hawaii to take away your memories of Franklin. So we're going to give you a little bit of Franklin.
Oh, look at
And this is a watercolor of downtown. This is by one of our local artists,
Oh, that is beautiful.
Tim Ross, who used to be our weatherman. And so
Wow.
you get to hang this in your home in Hawaii,
I-
or wherever you want to hang it.
With honor, Mayor. This is wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm floored by
he
this.
wants
I'm
our
speechless.
picture.
Thanks, Rob.
Gavin's going to get one.
There we go.
Up in there.
We get Rob.
Oh, absolutely.
Ready? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. Thank you. Great.
Mayor, thank you.
He walked in the parade yesterday, and, I mean, it was pretty impressive seeing the street line with so many people. But we got down and we'd finished walking the parade. We're over on the side, and 3 kids separately come up to Colonel Thompson and give him these handwritten notes, thanking him for what he does every single day, so.
That was
impressive.
that was an amazing experience yesterday, and I do have a thank you for the mayor and for the city of Franklin here. This has been one of the best parts about command. When you come into an infantry brigade combat team, you come in ready to do infantry things. Okay, I'm ready to go to the field. I've got 4,000 of these steely-eyed young soldiers ready to go to the field. But what I didn't expect was the richness of the relationships that we have with the communities around Fort Campbell. And it's nowhere do you see that better than Franklin, Tennessee. I mean, the relationship we have had with Franklin has just been incredibly rewarding. This is an incredibly patriotic community. Every time we come down here for anything, whether it be the parade yesterday, and just as the mayor said, I mean, just to see these kids come up and just with that sense of love for the country, and I'm just a soldier in uniform, but to them, it was someone they wanted to say thank you to, and for me personally, to be able to take that back to our soldiers and express that love and gratitude just means the world to our soldiers and to Fort Campbell. I've been stationed all over this country, from Georgia, Kansas, Washington State, Alaska, And nowhere do you find the warmth of connections that we've found here between Fort Campbell, 101st, and Franklin, Tennessee. I really mean that. I've been everywhere, and it's nowhere like this. I will say that this is the first place my wife has told me as we moved around, all right, honey, I think I found one. Like it's on the list because it's just, we don't see this anywhere else. And so it's been such a special part of the experience of Fort Campbell for me personally. I'm from Nebraska, and so it's like nothing else I've ever experienced. So Mayor, we do have a special gift for you in the city of Franklin. This is a flag that we flew over top of our headquarters in Baghdad, Iraq. Just a certificate of appreciation, just for all just the great support and the friendship that we've had with Franklin, Tennessee. Sir, thank you very much.
Thank you. And of course, y'all are welcome to enjoy all of the meeting. We'll see you then. Thank you. Okay, event permit for Christmas parade sponsored by the Kiwanis Club. Any questions on that one? Seeing none, we'll move on to the presentation on an employee medical clinic.
So our HR folks are coming up here, but one of the things we've worked on is ideas and options that provide better service to our employees and their families, and ways that we can do it that meet their lifestyles, their schedules, and do it in a way that we think could help us actually better use our resources over the long haul as well. So Kevin and Sarah will present this concept to you. There is a procurement item later in the agenda that just sort of gets that process started. But we wanted to introduce this concept to you tonight just briefly and make you aware of this work and this, I think, what is a really positive idea, has a lot of great possibilities for us going forward. So Kevin and Sarah, take it away.
All right, thank you. As Eric says, this won't take but a second here. I'm Kevin Townsell, HR Director.
And I'm Sarah, the Risk and Benefits Manager.
And what we're considering is, what sort of clinic possibilities are there? There's a possibility of having a mobile clinic, a van that comes up that's equipped, or we can have an on-site clinic. And we're sort of thinking that the near site would be a phenomenal option. And then you have to think about who would be eligible. All the employees. So we're thinking maybe we have the employees on our medical plan and their dependents. So that's a possibility. Plus all the retired employees that are covered under our medical plan. Then when it comes to funding, there's a couple ways to pay for that. It can either be a service fee or a per employee per month plan. So those are some options. Then of course, at this clinic, what's the level of care? We have to have a doctor on site at all times. We want a physician's assistant. We want a nurse practitioner. Those are the kinds of things we're going to be looking at. So what's the overall goal? Well, one, to reduce lost time from people missing work. Also, wouldn't it be phenomenal if we had a location that was so convenient? Just talking to Alderman Speedy before, briefly, that when he goes to the doctor, he's got to take time off from work. He's got to sit in the line. Wouldn't it be nice if he came to work and that was a possibility that could be someplace close by? Reduce out-of-pocket costs for our employees and their families. Manage worksite injuries. If someone got hurt on the job, wouldn't it be phenomenal if we had a place that was close, on-site or nearby, where they could be seen for their injuries? And also, the big thing is, again, if we were able to pull this off, that would again put the city of Franklin out there as an employer of choice. That's the kind of brand we're looking for. So what kind of services are we talking about? Acute care. When we're talking about acute care, we're talking about take care of someone who has a cold or flu. Even if you're trying to figure out if someone has to have an x-ray, this sort of a clinic can actually do x-rays as well. Preventative testing. That's the biometric screening for high cholesterol, flu shots, those sorts of things. Pre-employment physicals and drug testing. To work here at the City of Franklin, everyone has to go through a pre-employment physical and a drug test. So that would be something that could possibly happen at an on-site, near-site clinic. And then as I mentioned earlier, for workers' compensation, and after you have an accident, we require employees most of the time to get drug tested. That could be satisfied at a near-site, on-site clinic. And then, of course, a lot of the positions here are under random drug testing. an on-site clinic could resolve that as well. So then you might want to talk about what's up next.
So the next steps are, we're going to do a formal RFP process with the services that we're wanting the clinic to do for us. There will be a period of implementation where whoever we make a recommendation of will have to sit down and come up with a timeline. Our goal is to be in place by spring of 2020, so March, April of 2020.
So our goal would be also to have this in such a manner that we can utilize, as a self-insured entity, utilize funds that we're using today for other care could also be channeled or targeted at this type of care. Help us make it more convenient to our employees and their family members so that they can get these services at various times. We do think the Nearsite is probably the quickest startup and a good option for us. We will look at this really in a lot of ways as a pilot program to learn what works most effectively for us, for our employees and their families, and as we look at going forward, what will the best option be for us, whether it's an on-site or that, those could be things that we explore as you do a new city hall. But first, we got to start with doing something and seeing what our needs of our employees and their families are, and providing those services and just learning by doing it. And so this would get us on that path and give us the opportunity to provide this new option to our retirees and employees and family members that are on our existing plan.
Alderman Bland.
You keep talking about Nearsite being the best option. Why is that? Because to me, we would use our existing building that we pay for than going out and renting and starting infrastructure in another space. So
See,
I'm just curious
yeah.
why.
Sure. When we say Nearsite, we mean an existing operation. So it doesn't have to be built. There's no startup for us because it's an operation that like an urgent care type of thing that is already established and maybe providing service to other members of the public or other people on other healthcare plans.
But would we have a physician that's dedicated to our people? Because to me, then you're just standing in another line with all your 700 employees.
Yeah, you'd really be able to do sort of that's part of what will come out of the proposal process.
Right, so one of the things that we want to do for Nearsite is have like a fast pass, so employees can use an app or a website to kind of check in before they're there. Part of the agreement would be they would
Bump whoever's in front of them?
focus on City of Franklin needs.
Concierge level service.
Something.
Okay, good. We'll look forward to what comes out of this. Next is consideration ordinance 2019-37, an ordinance to adopt a new zoning ordinance and map of the city of Franklin, Tennessee.
We have our planning team coming forward. Obviously, the zoning ordinance has been something we've worked on for the last better part of 2 years, and want to take you through where we are at this stage as we move into kind of the voting steps of this process and take you through the elements that remain to be done in the adoption. So I'm not sure who's going to start us off. Kelly's going to start us off.
Thank you all for having us. We are thrilled to be here with the zoning ordinance update after 2 years of very thorough work on it. We have Brian Wright and Bill Wright with us tonight, and we're going to give the fuller presentation at the voting meeting later, but we wanted to highlight some of the public outreach results through this process. So in the beginning, we set out some goals for the update and worked to achieve those goals through better aligning the zoning districts with Envision Franklin recommendations, reducing the number of overlay districts, refining the building and site design standards, and making improvements to the usability of the ordinance. And we had a really robust public outreach process. We had 8 Planapalooza meetings, 6 outreach presentations. Those combined reached about 1,000 people. 2 days of drop-in hours in the planning department, 7 joint BOMA Planning Commission workshops, 24,000 mailers that went to every property owner in the city, and thousands of clicks on our Zone Franklin web pages. Most of the responses that we have received has been positive. An excellent job organizing the new ordinance, and expect Franklin will continue to set the standard here in Middle Tennessee. There's a handful of topics that have generated more public discussion, and so those are the ones that we'll cover tonight. The one that received the most input was short-term vacation rentals, and the proposed requirements for all residential districts in the PD districts are that the existing permitted short-term vacation rentals are grandfathered in, so they continue under the rules in place at the time they were established. A maximum of 1 short-term vacation rental per lot, and that the owner reside on the property. The majority of the comments have been positive for the proposed requirements, and 3 citizens have indicated they would like the future option to be able to use their property as a short-term vacation rental without living on the property. The next topic is multifamily in the Cool Springs districts. In RC12 and RC6, the proposed use regulations allow up to 40% of a proposed building square footage for the site to be multifamily. The common comment from developers was that this 40% maximum was too low. And this proposal is a step toward implementation of Envision Franklin, but we do expect that projects with a higher percentage of multifamily will come forward and will meet Envision Franklin. The difference here is really a matter of allowing site plans, which are approved by the Planning Commission in the RC 6 and 12 districts, that allow some amount of multifamily, while having higher amounts of multifamily come through the development plan approval process, just like it occurs today. We would like to revisit this provision, however, after the Cool Springs infrastructure study is completed. The Scenic Corridor Overlay District was another one that has generated discussion. One of the topics that we've heard the most throughout the years has been preservation of rural character and scenic view sheds. The SCO is geared toward protecting community character in those view sheds along corridors entering into Franklin and downtown Franklin. And that's through increased building setbacks and informal landscaping. We've heard a few concerns about the SCO on the west and northwest side of the city. This concept really began with the adoption of West Haven back in the late 1990s with the 300-foot setback, and was brought forward through the land use plan in 2004, other corridors through the 2008 zoning ordinance, through the character area overlay districts. So the SCO is really a compilation of the character area overlay district setbacks, Envision Franklin recommendations, and the conservation subdivision design concept on some of the periphery of the UGB. And this one is a new one, so it's not in your packet, but it has come out more recently, the floodplain protection standards. Franklin is in the community rating system, which is designed to reduce flood damage, strengthen and support the insurance aspects of the National Floodplain Insurance Program, encourage a comprehensive approach to floodplain management, and promote and reward communities that have higher regulatory standards than the minimum in the National Floodplain Insurance Program. And the benefit is receiving lower insurance premiums every year. There are no changes to how we currently practice and enforce and have regulations with the new ordinance as to what's in the ordinance today. No real changes are proposed. We've heard some concerns from citizens who would like to reduce some of the standards, but again, they are not new in terms of this ordinance. The changes, including lowering the first floor elevation from 3 feet to 1 foot above base flood elevation, moving the monitoring period for substantial improvement expenditures from 10 years to 5 years before there's that trigger that requires either elevation of a structure out of the floodplain or flood-proofing the structure itself, and exempting historic structures from floodplain requirements, which we already allow a variance process for historic structures in the HPO. to not be elevated as much as 3 feet. The first two changes would impact the CRS rating. We had a meeting with the state floodplain coordinator this afternoon, which would reduce the discount given to property owners each year and also increase the annual premium because you pay more as your first floor elevation is lower. So lowering from 3 feet to 1 foot would almost double the insurance premium per year for that. If the BOMA wishes to consider these changes, staff would propose that this would be done through a separate study not tied to the zoning ordinance update itself, as it does require notification to all of the property owners impacted in the floodplain, which include about 572.
Can you say, you said we doubled. I didn't see where that is anywhere near doubling.
Well, when we met with the floodplain coordinator today, the National Floodplain Insurance Program had some data in them where at 3 feet above the base flood elevation, the rate is about $357 a year. It jumps to $651 if you go down to 1 foot above base flood elevation.
I'm not sure everybody heard that. I don't know that people in the back can hear that, and that's really important because a lot of people hear about the floodplain right now. So could you say that a little louder?
Yes.
Right.
Make sure you turn on your mic.
That's for me, you, not me.
So the changes to the proposed changes that have been requested by citizens would impact the CRS rating if nothing else changed, which would reduce the discount given to property owners from 10% to 5% on their annual premiums each year, as well as it would increase the annual premium by about 45%. So, I take that back. It would jump from about $350 to about $650 per year if the first floor elevation is lowered from 3 feet to 1 foot above base flood elevation.
Are we 100% sure on that? I'm just reading.
This is what the state floodplain coordinator, the coordinator of the flood insurance program, told us directly today. Because we're getting the same question you're getting, and that was a direct answer.
I'm reading this from insurance people.
Well, this is the person who coordinates the flood insurance program.
And then I'm reading stuff from people who also write these insurance policies. And that's not what I'm seeing at all, so
Well,
there's a
it's really-
discrepancy there, I just
And
don't
the
know.
intent is not to change this, I don't think the intent is to change this tonight. We need to pass the zoning ordinance, and this will be something we can look at
Yeah, we can
at a
get
future
answers.
date. But we want to hear the input of the, yeah.
Okay, and I'm going to turn over the last topic and wrap up to Brian.
Well, before you do that, let's back up to the other, the setbacks. Let's go back and look at those just for a second. You made a statement, I think, that the 300-foot setback for West Haven had been in effect since West Haven was initially entered, or when did the 300-foot setback begin on the corridor overlay?
On the corridor overlay, the West Haven development plan, through the design process for that plan, set that setback at 300 feet.
When?
When the original West
2002,
Haven
3?
development
Whenever you
plan was
adopted that plan.
adopted.
Okay. So that setback there is not based upon this map that we've got here. That setback is based upon a 2002 or 3 plan. It's not like the Central Franklin overlay, the historic overlay, but you've got scenic corridor overlays here on Goose Creek, I guess it's Carter's Creek Pike, New 96. So now those couldn't have been done then. When were those, and what are their widths?
Some of them were brought about in the 2004 land use plan. Goose Creek Bypass, for example, has
Was-
been 250 feet since the 2004 land use plan, and then codified in the ordinance through the character area overlay districts.
in 2008 with our current ordinance. There are a number of them that are like that were established in 2004. There are some that were established with Envision Franklin in 2017, but they were all in different places. They were in recommendations in Envision Franklin, they were in character area overlay districts, and so for this process, we pulled that out because one of our goals was simplifying and making it easier to find out where the information lies in the zoning ordinance, to put that into a separate scenic corridor overlay district itself, so you could go there to find it. We also looked at conservation subdivision in Envision Franklin, which recommends 50% open space to be preserved and geared towards preserving scenic view sheds. So a lot of those areas that are on the periphery, like Carter's Creek, include setbacks that help define where those areas are that should be preserved as part of the 50% open space.
So just taking Carter's Creek then, was it established when was it established in? In 2004, 3, 17?
This one is with this process. Through
17.
Well, through Envision Franklin Conservation
Okay.
Subdivision and then with this. So that one has not been codified before this process.
So basically what we've done here is take all of the scenic overlay districts and tried to put them all together under one map with one color so that we could see where they all are. But none of them are, I guess my question is, what determines the width of the scenic overlay?
That's a great question. Aside from the ones that are specifically in the ordinance today, the ones that we've looked at for this process, we mapped throughout the city, and we looked at the existing building setbacks. We modeled different setback distances in those, and we looked at the pattern of existing buildings along those setbacks, those corridors, and then we did a mobile workshop to look at the specific buildings and those setbacks in those corridors and assign them that way.
All right?
All right, thank you. So a lot of the things that Kelly just went over are sort of higher level topics. But there were several things in the ordinance that had to do with the actual specifics of what buildings look like. And so one of the things that came up over and over in the community through our visual preference surveys, we got feedback over and over that the community was not interested in having facades of houses being dominated by garages. And so some of the things that came up through that process were actually changing the zoning ordinance back to what it once was, with the 20-foot setback for garages instead of the 10 feet that it got changed to during the recession. And so we've kind of come out of that. We're at a point now the community is, as strong as ever, and really, has the firm foundation it needs to be able to deal with the little bit further setback. And there are a few reasons for it too. It's not just the, what the community was saying with the, just having the houses look like they're more about cars than people. It also has to do with, a lot of times if the setback is too short, if it's 10 feet and somebody parks in front of their garage, which we know a lot of people do, now they're across the sidewalk. And we've got, families with kids going out in the street to get around the car there, and, it happens all the time. But I think the biggest thing for us was we just heard it over and over and over. This is one of those things that just kept coming up, as it does around the country. I mean, this is, as I've told you all, we work around the country, and this is something that is pretty universal these days. So I want to show you a few examples in the community where people are already addressing this. This image is really great because you see about 4 or 5 different ways that they've configured the houses and the lots to accommodate a setback of the garage. Sometimes even, obviously much further than 20 feet back, so that you don't see the garage at all. And when you do, it's set back so the cars are in front of it. This, the last image was West Haven, and so, we all know what that looks like, and it's, very nice and all that. But this is a much more modest community And similar thing though, you see how the garages are set back far enough so that the car can be behind it. This is the thing, this image right here is really important, and this really sums it all up. So look down the street here, it looks, you see cars, 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 it's like a parking lot essentially, right? And watch what happens when you move the garage 20 feet. Now look down the street. So this is 10 feet, 20 feet. Now don't look at the first house, look at the third, fourth, fifth, all the way down the street. That's the key, right there. So it's one of those things, you know, we know it's easily done, and there's not really any reason to not go ahead and go back to that higher standard to get where we want to go. So last thing is, just to wrap up, timeline and the schedule. So we've gotten the green check box there on the 24th, was the Planning Commission hearing, went well, and here we are on the second box on November 12th, which was the first reading tonight in this work session. Then on the 26th, there's a second reading and public hearing. On December the 10th, the third and final reading, and then the effective date for the new ordinance would be December the 30th. So a lot of time and effort has gone into developing this, a lot of community input, as you saw in that graphic, just an unbelievable amount of effort. And again, because we work all over the country, we see all kinds of public input. We do our part with the Planapalooza and all that. The thing that's been amazing to us is just with what staff has done on their own, outside of even us. It's just been remarkable, and I think they really need to be acknowledged for that. So anyway, so that's the end for now. And so one last slide, the most important slide. So first and foremost, new ordinance is way better. We heard over and over all the bemoaning about the old ordinance. You know, this is way better than what it was. But that doesn't do it justice. This is a really, really good ordinance. It's not just better than the old one. It's a really good ordinance on a national level. One of the things that we remind every community is that there's no such thing as a perfect document, though. No perfect ordinance. It doesn't have to be perfect today to adopt it. And so you can't anticipate every scenario. That's really the truth of the matter. So what we always do is recommend having sort of live with it for a year, test it out, see how it goes, and keep a list. What do you keep hearing about? What's something that seems to be problematic? Some of these things we talked about tonight that require further study, because after all the effort and time and community input that's gone into this process, to make a change at this point is really, it's kind of like, okay, well, let's just figure it out right here real quick. It seems like it would be prudent, at least from my perspective as an outsider, to really live with it for a little while and see what it does and make that list and be a bit scientific about making some changes. And so after 12 months, do a cleanup, get it all ready to go for next year, and you're good to go.
You want to go ahead with the public? Yeah. Walter Green, 2 minutes. Following that, Kim Laster, Mary Pierce, Greg Gamble, Scott Black, Ernie Bacon, and I'm going to put Amy Baggett in whenever she comes back in with her children. Huh? She's out there with her kids, so whenever she comes back in, I'll let her go ahead of everybody else. Go ahead, Mr. Walter Green.
Sorry, thank you so much. I'm Walter Green. I live at 227 4th Avenue South, and am acting on behalf of the DNA, the Downtown Neighborhood Association, tonight. I'm a board member of that group, and our group's primary responsibility, above all else, is to advocate for neighborhoods within our boundaries. Those boundaries, when you look at the zoning ordinance, are most like the proposed residential district R4. Until recently, almost nobody knew how many short-term vacation rentals there were in the area. Currently about 250 in Franklin and about 100 in R4. STVRs, short-term rentals, are not all bad, but they can be problematic. The ones that are most troubling are the ones that don't have an owner living on site. And about 40%, by my research, of the ones in the Franklin area are in that category. The DNA is most concerned about those non-owner occupied STVRs within R4. Why is this? 3 primary reasons. One is that R4 is strictly residential. Short-term rentals are businesses and actually small hotels. The ones that have no owner living on site are essentially small hotels with no on-site manager. They have no business being in residential areas, but they are. There are plenty in R4, probably about 40. A second primary reason is that these STVRs replace neighbors with a building that's either vacant or is occupied by transients. This is not healthy for our neighborhoods. It creates a disjointedness, a lack of connectivity, and endangers the character of our neighborhoods. Also, because STVRs are located in primarily our smaller and relatively less expensive properties, they reduce the inventory of affordable housing. The zoning ordinance update calls for newly permitted STVRs in R4 to have an owner permanently occupying the premises and allows one rental per lot. Our DNA board has voted overwhelmingly to support that language. We also strongly feel
If you go ahead
that
and
the
wrap up.
existing, yes, 10 seconds, thank you, sir. We also feel that the existing non-owner occupied rentals in R4 should be eliminated as soon as the law allows, and that the city should add whatever resources are needed to monitor all STVRs and strictly enforce appropriate rules. Thank you so much, and I appreciate the city being assertive about this.
Amy Baggett, and we've been giving people 2 minutes. Amy.
It will not take longer than that. Thank you so much for letting me jump up here. My name's Amy Baggett. I'm a resident of Franklin. I'm here with my daughters tonight on behalf of myself and my husband. We live on Murfreesboro Road. I grew up in Franklin, and we absolutely love living close to downtown. We're involved in all the Franklin activities with the kids. My daughter's in kindergarten at Franklin Elementary. It's just such a special place. But as y'all know, with a growing family, we need lots of space, and we want to stay close, but houses are so expensive. So for us, the main thing that we're here to talk about is the flood ordinances and working on all that. So I just wanted to vocalize the support of myself and my husband Patrick in reviewing certain flood fringe overlay ordinances found in both the old and the new zoning ordinance. We believe that there are a few simple changes that could be made that would greatly impact the ability of property owners in flood fringe overlay to maintain and improve their own properties over time. And we believe this can be done without adverse effects to life, safety, or increasing flood issues. We ask that you refer to the emailed recommendations that Patrick, my husband, has sent to the city staff, the zoning suggestion email inbox, and to each member of BOMA. There aren't many of us in the flood fringe overlay, but everyone that we've spoken with, and there's a great presence here tonight, wholeheartedly supports these common sense changes. What our goal is the betterment of the city of Franklin and just to improve our homes and the beauty of Franklin. So thank you all for your service, and thank you for your consideration in this matter.
Kim Laster, followed by Mary Pierce, followed by Greg Gamble.
Hello, my name is Kim Laster, and we live at 424 Murfreesboro Road in Zone AE. It's in the 100-year floodplain in a little Victorian that will soon celebrate the 150-year birthday. I would like to talk to you about one number in the new zoning ordinance. First, thank you for serving our community and helping to protect our safety and maintain our property values and reduce the cost of flood insurance. I respectfully ask that you consider one aspect of the zoning ordinance regulating substantial improvements within the fringe flood overlay district. FEMA's National Flood Insurance Program uses a community rating system complete with a 600-page document to describe the scoring process. The community rating system has 10 classes. One is the best, and it's based on a point system with a maximum score of 4,500 points. Homeowners, currently Franklin, is Class A, 8, with a score of 1,182. which entitles Franklin homeowners to a 10% discount on flood insurance. The Community Rating Series has 4 series with 18 activities used to classify flood protection. It appears most of these points Franklin has earned in the Mapping and Regulation series. Of the 1,182 points, only 40 points are awarded for cumulative substantial improvements of 50% of the appraised value in a 10-year period. In the CRS manual, 20 points are awarded if cumulative substantial improvements of 50% of the appraised value reset in a 5-year period. I respectfully propose that the definition of substantial improvement within the FFO overlay district on page 385 be changed from a 10-year reset to a 5-year reset. This would lower our score by 20 points, still maintaining the Class 8 status and a 10% reduction in flood insurance. A 5-year reset would be much less restrictive to homeowners and allow properties to be maintained, repaired, or improved at a more reasonable rate. I further request that the city consider implementing the other 17 activities of the community rating systems to further improve safety and property protection. The other series are public information, flood damage reduction, and warning and response. Improving our score would further reduce the cost.
You go ahead and wrap up, please.
Okay. Improving our score would further reduce the cost of flood insurance and property damage. Thank you.
Mary Pierce?
Mr. Mayor, I think Greg will probably cover what I was going to say.
Greg Gamble, followed by Scott Black, followed by Ernie Bacon.
Hello, my name is Greg Gamble, and I'm very excited about this new ordinance, to be honest with you. It's so much better organized. I know staff is very proud of it, and we're already looking at its application on properties across Franklin, and so, but I fully endorse it, very excited about it. I'm here tonight to represent Animalia. Animalia is located on New Highway 96, directly in front of West Haven. And in around 2002, I think it was, West Haven was approved as a PUD and did have a requirement for a 300-foot setback along Highway 96. In 2009, the zoning ordinance specifically stated that a 300-foot buffer be applied to the north side of New Highway 96. It said that on the south side that the design standards should be in keeping with West Haven, but did not specifically restrict the 300-foot buffer to the south side of the road. This new scenic corridor setback for Animalia is very significant. It impacts over 3/4 of the property along the frontage. The house only sits back about 120 feet from the road. They're interested in doing expansions for an animal hospital, for developing the property to complement what is there today and the business that they have there today. Animalia is the only property along Highway 96 that is truly affected by this, because the rest of this from McHatcher all the way to the Harpeth River is West Haven. It's the West Haven Golf Course to the west. To the east, you have the West Haven PUD, which is already, as was stated by staff, already has the 300-foot restriction. So this scenic corridor applied to the south side now, because currently in the old ordinance it only applies to the north, but by applying it to the south, it affects it affects Animalia specifically. I'd like for you to consider either one, not applying it to the south side because it's already a part of the West Haven PUD, or second, starting it at Boyd Mill Pike and letting it go from Boyd Mill Pike to the west. This portion here is the more urban area on the south side where West Haven is. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Scott Black. I live at 117 Bromley Park Lane. First, let me start by saying congratulations. I think we're going to have, for the acknowledgement of the election that just happened, we have 4 new aldermen. Welcome and thanks for all the work you're doing. I just want to say, as Greg did, I really like this new zoning ordinance. It is so, as Brian said, it is so much easier than the one we had before and so much easier to work with. My hat's off to the staff. I want to commend the planning staff for all the work they had to do. And I want you guys to know, and I want to acknowledge that they wear 3 hats when they're doing what they do. They're doing this long-range plan. They're juggling the day-to-day stuff that comes to them with every new project that comes in, as Greg just alluded to. And then the hardest thing they're doing, though, is educating not just the public, but the elected officials and the appointed officials. And sometimes understanding the complicated details of planning is so hard. Just like as Brian showed, the 20-foot setback on the garage, and as we've talked about this 300-foot setback, there's great scientific basis in a lot of the planning principles that these guys work with. And I think we're very blessed to have the staff that we do, and I just wanted to kind of let you guys know that. But it puts a burden on you as the elected official. You guys are now the ones on the front line having to take the bullets when you get that phone call of a citizen that doesn't like something. But I think it's important to speak with staff, understand why staff supported something that they did, because it's all rooted in very good planning principles. It's very challenging sometimes to deal with them. We're going through a lot of changes with this idea of going from what was really spot zoning. And I know our staff has been working for the last 10 years to change from that. But what we're doing with this zoning ordinance is we're really ripping the Band-Aid off and saying, no more spot zoning. We're now going into placemaking. We're making places where people enjoy being. Luckily, we're blessed in this city to have Southern Land Company, who's done West Haven. We have Boyle, who's doing the projects that they're doing, that are making places, but they have large projects. The rest of it is burdened onto the staff to try to make the same thing happen. So I just want to commend the staff. I want to thank you guys for the job you do. Congratulations to the newly elected aldermen, and thanks again for your time tonight. Huh? You are new now tonight.
My name is Ernie Bacon. I live at 224 4th Avenue South. I'm here tonight to support Zone Franklin, and specifically the additional restrictions on short-term rentals, specifically to R4. Thank you.
Okay. Alderman? Sure.
Brian, I've got a question for you. I'm not opposed to the 20-foot setback on the garages at all, but I do have 2 questions. Well, really one. I think I'd rather see a bunch of in these 20-foot setbacks, you're still going to get cars. You're still going to look down the street and get cars because you get teenagers and people, and sometimes you're stacking 2 and 3 cars. Sometimes you get 1 car in the garage because you've got other equipment in the garage with teenagers and people coming and going a lot of times. So a lot of times families will only put 1 car in the garage. Rarely do they put 2 in the garage, but sometimes they do, depending on if they're skimping on the garage sizes. If they're skimping on the garage sizes, they're putting 1 car in there. And I've been told now that we have 2 bins that a lot of people are only going to be parking 1 car in the garage because the garages are sort of small. So my question to you, not only will we see a lot of cars stacked down the streets anyway, but that'll come and go and that'll be random, who knows? And there's nothing really we can do about it. So if I had that option versus the other option, I guess I'd pick the 20-foot one. But how do we manage the stormwater runoff from a 20-foot versus a 10-foot that increases our stormwater runoff? And so how do we handle that? Because we're always in the city of Franklin concerned about stormwater runoff, and then we have these large parking lots, and we have a lot of stormwater runoff. So we're always talking about pervious, impervious surfaces, and so that's a question I have for you as far as increasing, subdivision of 400 or 500 homes, and then you put these larger driveways.
Sure. Well, there's a couple of different things that you can do. I think that sort of the point one of the speakers made earlier about coming at this issue from a lot of different angles. So being more rigorous about it in other aspects that don't have a sort of a negative impact on the sort of the image of the community and don't get picked up on the things we don't like as citizens list. I think that you could, furthermore, rather than just moving the garage forward, you can have the garage in the same place and move the house forward. I mean, there are a few different things that you can do. Obviously, if the house is close to the street already, then, that's not possible. I think that at the end of the day, yes, there is some impact on the amount of impervious surface if you do this. If you use conventional driveway building techniques, there's a lot of different things you can do in order to address this issue as well. So it's multifaceted, I
Okay,
guess.
so with that said, would we investigate possibly writing into that ordinance pervious surfaces for our driveways?
Pervious surface, to my knowledge, I can get you this answer more specifically, but to my knowledge, we do allow pervious surfacing for driveways. Currently, it is permitted by the stormwater ordinance, so I don't believe that's really an issue. We don't see that normally because there can be a cost difference at times or maintenance cost difference, but there are ways to do Hollywood drives. There are other things that also kind of balance out the impervious surface without adding additional maintenance costs too. So there are a couple different things, but as Brian said, it also really depends on the configuration of the floor plan of the house. There are ways to still set that garage back without taking up additional impervious surface with the actual structure itself. So.
I think that would be my main concern with that. Not that I'm opposed to it. I just have that concern and see how we could mitigate that a little bit better or deal with that a little bit better.
Yeah. Well, and I think, throughout this public input process, I haven't heard any citizen talk about how much they love the conventional suburban commercial shopping center parking lots.
Yeah, sure.
And so,
That's right.
and that's one of those locations where you might get a little bit more rigorous with your standards and be, not as concerned about that here because of the visuals.
And the only other point I had to make was the short-term vacation rentals. Some of us have gotten together and spoken, and I have no problem if in R4, if the people down here would like to have owner-occupied, I have no problem with that. I do have an issue, I take an issue with putting it blanketly across the entire city. I just don't agree with that. I've had a number of feedbacks on that. Some people have supported it. But I have found out through staff here and codes, building and neighborhood services, and with our police officers as well, I am not one to make another regulation just to make another regulation because we need to improve something or control something or regulate something, rather than looking at what we already have in the books and is it or is not working. And Eric, you remember said to me, you said, we do enforce our ordinances, and he's absolutely right, but we cannot enforce our ordinances when people have issues with short-term rentals that are in the area and they do not call it in. And I'm adamant about that. It really got my goat when I'm talking to people over and over and over, and I have found out over and over and over and over when I've talked to them that they have not called in. They love to complain about it. They want us to put on another regulation and add on another regulation, but yet they refuse or have not called it in across the board, except for one time that I can tell you. And when they did, they called me. I said, let's take care of it. They got on it. This is a number of years ago. They had a warning. They had another citation. The second time they said, if you have a third complaint, you're gone. True to form, as Eric said, we enforce those ordinances. Boom, they're gone. They are no longer allowed to have a short-term rental because they blew it. They did not meet the regulation. They did not stay with our ordinances. They did not obey our laws. This is what we need. We need people to call in and do these things. These things will not happen if we regulate it correctly. And so I think across the city to have a blanket ordinance that says, hey, you all have to have owner occupied in order to be a short-term rental, I just don't support that. And the other thing is something else that was in the ordinance as well, that if you sold your place, then that was null, it was null and void. You could no longer be a short-term rental. And yet, I do know one family on a 14-acre spot in the Franklin with a home that may sell their home in 2 to 3 years to their children to continue that short-term rental. It's quite an interesting property. I think a lot of us know that property. And if they do, they will no longer be able to have that short-term rental and have that income. And they're also doing a lot of corporate short-term rentals there because it's in the Cool Springs area. It's in my district. So I see some issues there, and so I just wanted to speak to that tonight and throw that out there for people to consider. I certainly won't support it blanketly going across the entire city. And I would highly recommend that people have issues with this. They call in, and they call if they're not satisfied with the calls that they're making to City Hall. Call your alderman, get your alderman on it. Whatever we need to do to enforce our regulations that we have on the books.
Alderman Martin.
Fourth Ward is not the only neighborhood downtown where there are lots of short-term rentals. Ward 3 has a lot. Ward 2 has a lot. You know, I don't know how you regulate that, but those wards have a lot of residences and neighborhoods downtown. Ward 1, you've got Founder's Point. They're all around us.
Ward 2.
Ward 2, I'm sorry. Excuse me, Alderman McClendon. Anyway, I don't know how maybe we just want to let Ward 1 go and have it in the others, but,
No.
you know, I don't know how you would determine which neighborhoods do it if you don't do it by wards or do it across the city. I don't know, but I do know that Ward 4, Ward 3, and Ward 2 are downtown neighborhoods too. Your wards are downtown.
May I add something to that, Ms. Mayor?
Quick response.
Real quick, I do think in some ways, maybe, too, that Ward 1 could be unique in some ways because of the corporate entities that are located in Ward 1. Probably, Scott, you probably get some of that down with Berry Farms as well now, or will in the future especially. But in Ward 1, we have quite a few of those, and we have numerous that are renting to corporate entities that are coming in here on short term.
And likely ward maps are going to change after the next census.
True, and but I think we'll have, the Cool Springs area will still have that uniqueness, and that probably is a different kind of animal.
Alderman McClendon.
Isn't Ward 1 also in Royal Oaks? Royal Oaks is
Yes,
Alderman
yes, and that
McClendon.
may not remain, who knows, I don't know.
I got a couple. One, I'm concerned about the unintended consequences of the scenic corridors provision. There are places where it seems that it will be a taking, or close, or arguably a taking. 300 feet is a football field. I don't know how many affected properties on 96, for example, won't be at least half consumed by such a setback provision. That seems to me to be potentially very problematic. Second, there's the frontage types in section 7.2. And I'm not going to go amending anything tonight, but I am highlighting some things that have been brought to my attention that concern me. Again, an unintended consequence potentially of the frontage types where we have, if I understand this correctly, in all but light industrial, high industrial, and one other type, basically we're forcing buildings up close onto the sidewalk or street. And I think applying that is going to create some real problems in terms of we're going to wind up with things that don't look like they belong where they are. And we're also going to wind up with some things that are very difficult to make feasible for developers. And I'm not primarily concerned with making developers money, but I also don't want to make rules that we don't mean to inflict the outcome that we inflict. And then on this short-term rental thing, I've recently had the occasion to litigate some of this stuff in Nashville. I'm not sure why we would make a rule regarding short-term rentals that, that didn't apply citywide. And I think that if you flush them out or limit them in one neighborhood, you haven't done away with the demand. You've only zoned them into different places. So it's kind of like, it's kind of like that. That's a good example, because I was going to use liquor stores or red light districts, because
Randy, good one.
some places zone them all in, cluster them all in, and just police them all in one place, and other places try to disperse them. But honestly, the same things that the downtown neighbors would say about why they don't want transient, investor-owned short-term rentals apply to my next door, to the house on either side of me. There's nothing, I mean, it's not that there's nothing special about R4, but there's nothing more special about R4 that doesn't apply just as much to me. So I'm generally inclined to support a requirement that short-term rentals be owner-occupied anywhere, and that short-term rental be defined as anything less than 30 days, and that we have a mechanism for policing that, where they have to renew their permit annually and be subject to enforcement action based upon complaint activity. Because that's what's the problem, right? Like, the problem isn't necessarily just the existence, it's the abuse. And as I said, I've recently litigated some of these things in Nashville, and where the neighbors get bent, I get it. They got fans from out of town throwing beer bottles over the house in the middle of the night in a neighborhood. Nobody wants that. So I think we look at protecting not a part of Franklin, but all of Franklin from the vagaries of, and that tends to happen less. The bad stuff tends to happen less when you have an owner occupied. And we can talk about how do you know if it's owner occupied or not, but generally speaking in Nashville, and I don't quickly look to other cities to learn what to do, but I have litigated this, and Nashville has a requirement that you be a permanent resident. And I've had to prove what is a permanent resident. And it's things like you're registered to vote. You have a business license, not just for the short-term rental, but like you have some indicia of presence that goes beyond just you bought a place and you rent it out. And as far as the enforcement, Alderman Berger goes, I don't know what they're using, but Nashville has a web scrubber, a web search.
Yep.
And they will find you. If you list on Airbnb, and it's software, if you list on Airbnb, you don't have to wait for someone to call in and say it exists. They're gonna find you, and they're gonna send you the appropriate documents. So those things, and then the last comment I'll make has to do with, I'm gonna want to have in public a conversation with staff about the potential unintended consequences of our zoning ordinance as it applies or would apply and impact the opportunity for the private sector developers to deliver workforce affordable, attainable, whatever word you want to use, housing. Because I'm concerned that there are some provisions in this ordinance that are going to essentially raise the floor, no pun intended, for what a minimum purchase price becomes. And if we mean to do that, fine. But if we pass this ordinance as is without considering that, then we don't need an affordable housing. We don't need a task force on affordable housing anymore. We just destroyed it. You can't overcome minimum lot sizes of a certain size, whatever, with any amount of waiving fees and $100,000 grants and stuff. You just, at some point, you've just done away with it. And there's no amount of waving and saying nice things that'll overcome that. If that's what we intend to do, okay, but, and I've had some brief conversations with staff about why 45 feet instead of 35 feet, minimum lot widths and all that. I want to have that conversation in public, perhaps next time. But some of these regulations work, it seems to me, work crosswise against at least the opportunity for some of the affordable, attainable workforce housing that we talk about a lot.
Anybody else?
Mr. Mayor, can I just address one specific thing? Because I want all the aldermen to be aware. In regards to the lot sizes that have come up over discussions over the last several months, those provisions are in Envision Franklin, and we are looking into an amendment. We have a mobile workshop planned in February that you've all received an email about, to actually look through what we want to, what the board, what the planning commission would like those standards to be for lot widths for alley loaded especially. But the lot widths are not established in the PD district in the zoning ordinance. There is not a minimum lot width in the PD district. So when these development plans come forward, they are not in violation of the zoning ordinance, and we are taking forward a process to amend Envision Franklin as desired by the board and the planning commission.
Alderman Peterson.
I thank you for the things that we have done to make this better, because it definitely is better. I'm only going to speak on one thing. On the presentation, one of the comments was refine the building and design standards. That was on page 3, I think, of the presentation today. Perhaps talking about unintended consequences. If you're talking about a design standard, then much of what you're discussing is appearance or looks. And if you look on page 114, they have specific comments about building types for houses. And I know that front porches are very popular now, no question about that. But on this page, whenever it's talking about front features, it requires that every house that will be built must be of the type that has a porch on it, a covered porch specifically. No other front door appearances would be allowed if this is passed. In other words, every house that's built would have to have a front porch. You know, I want to read what it says. On entry features, it says shall have a covered porch, covered stoop, or a balcony over the entrance. And I want to go along with the continuation on this building orientation and entry. It says a side facade facing a frontage. In other words, any house that's on a corner, and I'll read from what it says here, shall have a similar level of architectural detailing, window alignment, and organization to the front as to the front facade, including side or wraparound porches. So in other words, any house that's on a corner not only has to have this porch type idea and appearance there on its front, but also on its side. Now, I happen to have live in a house that we designed and built 30 years ago. It would be prohibited now. And it's not just the houses that were built 30 years ago. Houses in newer areas. I've driven through Berry Farms and other developments in kind of that type of area, and in Ladd Park and others down Carruthers, and other houses, other areas in this county, even very expensive houses. Many have porches because, as I say, they're certainly very popular now, but not all of them. Some of them are recessed. Some even have just the, no recess at all. But I'm just saying to you that, as written, this would require every house to have that appearance. And to me, that appearance is not the only one that should be acceptable in the city of Franklin in newly built houses. It is, even though it's very popular. And the last thing I want to say is that to me, neighborhoods are a very, very important part of our city. And right now, we're looking at things that have already been approved would push us close to just having 50% single-family residential in the city. If everything that we have approved right now is built, it would go down to 51% single-family. So I want us to encourage neighborhoods, but again, my comment here is I will really be asking that we eliminate those two pieces of the entry features and the facade facing a frontage, because I do not think that every house built from now on must have those particular appearances. Thank you.
Can I respond?
Sure.
So I think there's an important distinction to note. The language that you read has several more options than just the porch, right? So we start off by talking about just the
But
porch.
may I say, it also says a stoop. Right now, in our current zoning ordinance, there is not even a definition for stoop.
That's right.
There is one in the new proposal, but still,
Yes.
what I'm saying to you is, if you look at the diagram in the back, whenever they give the definition, that's not what
Sure.
would be all right to me.
What you find, and sort of to your point, most of the houses, I don't know what percentage of the houses that come in today, 99% of the houses come in, have some sort of a stoop, a porch, or whatever. There's a few reasons that it's in there. One is actually, to your other point about neighborhoods being important, that porches and stoops and all of those things have a neighborliness quality to them. But they also have a functional aspect to them. The houses that you see, the historic homes that you see that don't have them, at a certain point, for the most part, they quit doing that. Those are the earliest houses, some of the oldest houses in the country. I just came from, working in New England in these ancient towns, and you see that. And then at a certain point, they're like, oh, you know what? It rains here, it snows here. Let's cover our heads. Let's do that, And so that's why they started doing it. So there's a few architectural styles that you see around. A Carter house is a good example. But when you look in sort of the architectural literature, that was a farmhouse, right? And a farmhouse, that was a sort of a standard thing, a masonry farmhouse that didn't have a covering. And so I guess from our perspective, there's a functionality, not just protecting the occupant, but also protecting and weatherproofing the house itself, so the rain doesn't get in and all that. So having maintenance issues and on and on and on. I think that if you look close at the ordinance, there are probably many things that are purely just aesthetic or neighborliness or whatever. And so I would hesitate to remove it if it were me. But it's certainly one of those things that it wouldn't make the whole ordinance fall to pieces if we didn't have it. But I'm hard pressed to sort of find a reason to not, if that's what the market's already doing anyway. So that was one thing. Oh, and then the other, sort of coming full circle to what you were saying a minute ago about unintended consequences. This is, sort of can fall in those lines as well. I can pretty boldly say that there aren't really unintended consequences in the ordinance. What happens is an ordinance like this is written in an intentional way to create an outcome. It's an intentional process versus how zoning used to be written, where it's just use is here, use is there. And our only intention was to make sure that these things didn't go next to those things. And so all of the specific details and the nuances in that are very, very intentional. And given the time, we could go through all of them and cover them in great detail as to why they're done, not only in this ordinance, but all around the country, not just by us, but also, many other firms that write zoning ordinances as well.
May I say one last comment about that? I do agree that you are definitely intentional about only allowing houses that have porches. But my comment is, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. and I love the house that I'm in. It would never be allowed under this. And in my opinion, it is still a lovely home and should be acceptable. So my problem is that you are prohibiting everything except what you think looks good.
Alderman Martin, I'm going to give you a quick comment.
All right,
You want to say something?
first of all, I have friends right now who built a home without a front covering. I won't call it a porch, but after years and years of tracking in rain, snow, everything, and getting wet, they decided to put a little porch over there. Not a porch, it's just a covering over their little stoop. So I know that even though the house was built without, they discovered that they needed it. Now, I do want to say this. We're sitting up here listening to all of this. I want to say I sat in many meetings when these things were discussed, and I know that they were intentionally put in. As you worked with it time after time after time, you spent hours on trying to figure out what was the best. There are things in here that I don't want, but we're not going to be happy about, all of us are not going to be happy with everything. But I'm going to let that go. But I do think that there are many things in here that we're not going to like, but you have done it with a purpose, and I appreciate it, what you've all done.
Mr. Mayor, could I just address one other thing briefly? I know you mentioned, Alderman Peterson, about the side porches, and I totally understand if that's, if the board wishes to change that particular aspect of it. I would say that perhaps we work on some language to still look at side facades that are fronting streets, though, because we have had some issues with some particular neighborhoods that the way the windows are placed, it does create a very odd look from the road frontage. And so I think there's a way that particular standard could be addressed to eliminate the side porches, but maybe not eliminate the intent of the standard overall.
Vice Mayor, you got
Briefly.
the floor.
I know Alderman Clinton mentioned workforce housing and affordable housing on yard widths, but you also have to consider a senior citizen may be wanting to downsize and not wanting a 65-foot yard. So that's some of the things that you have to look at. And I understand that when you're saying that you can do a PUD or a planned development or whatever, and you could bypass the requirements. That's really defeating in my opinion, that's defeating the purpose of the ordinance, is to allow the mechanism that allows someone to sidestep whatever your intentions are. If your intentions is to have nothing less than 45 feet, have it and have it. But I'm not for the 45 foot or the 65. I'm for less than that. Mine is less than that I live in now. So that's just, and it doesn't have to be workforce, it doesn't have to be affordable, but it could be downsizing for a senior citizen who wants to move out of something else and into something smaller.
Go ahead.
I'm just gonna make a comment about the porches and stoops, because that's what makes neighborhood, in our traditional neighborhoods here in downtown. You see, for the most part, porches. Older neighborhood people walk and gather, and kids connect. So I would be in support of your porches, whether it's side porches. I would like to have that option. If I'm on a corner lot, I would like to have the option of having a side porch as well as a front porch. And I like the fact that we are creating intentions. That's very good. There are several things that we want to see as our community grow. You've heard affordability, you've heard a setback. So those are things we want to see. However, we may have to tweak a couple of things related to those opportunities, like the 300 feet setback in the scenic corridor. Because if we're affecting maybe one or two properties, we need to either find out how we can help those properties not have that infringement. If it's moving something down that we heard earlier, a few feet or to another block, in order to create that scenic corridor and not interfere with that particular property, that's been around for years. I would like to see us do that. And we need to make sure we're communicating to the floodplain properties that insurance, because if we find that everything is true that has been articulated about the perhaps doubling of your insurance premium if you lower that floor level from 3 to 1, then I think our citizens need to know that. And we need to hear from you all. If you want to see your premiums double, if indeed that is true, and based on the man who you all met with today, I wouldn't think that he's here giving us fairy tales.
Alderman Blanton.
I'll be real brief. I think with everybody commenting, I don't want us to take a vote tonight, and I know we don't want to strip this apart piece by piece because we do want to try to get some of the things already in progress, but specifically, and I had said this to the board in an email, I do think we need to look a little bit closer at the floodway fringe. I know that we've got experts on both sides, but when you've got an insurance person who actually writes those policies, I think they've got a little bit of expertise in the area as well. And not to mention, I think there were several people that, were underneath that umbrella of support for that. As it pertains to the scenic corridor overlay, specifically on 96 West, I think Greg had some great points as it affects Anna Amelia. That back portion of their property is used quite a bit for community enjoyment. Most often, not just dog events, but definitely that's the crux of what happens there. And so they're strategic to not be able to expand where they need to without losing that opportunity to share that with the community. So definitely I would love to see that either start at Boyd Mill, as was, whatever that word is, brain dead. But as the front porches, everything old is new again. I mean, it's that way with everything we do, whether it's clothes or shoes or design. And I think if it's going to help single-family dwelling like you're talking about, I would love to see that product continue to build in our community. So that's kind of how I feel about the things that have been plucked out. I do think it's important for us to vote on this as a whole, but I wanted to go on record to say those are the things I'd like to take a deeper look at.
One quick thing on that, just in terms of the way forward, what I think we would recommend is adopting the zoning ordinance and identifying some of these items that need some additional deliberation and thought and feedback, but to keep the progress moving, because it is a significant improvement over what we have today. You heard about some of those topics already. It was discussed in the presentation, but things like the scenic corridor overlay, the short-term vacation rental, the floodplain regulations, which again aren't changing, but we understand there's some requests to look at changes. The garage setback component, those are things that might deserve a little more discussion. Let's not try to tweak those on the fly. Let's give it the more deliberation that it might deserve, but let's get the updated zoning and ordinance and the many, many benefits associated with it in place, and commit to that kind of that short list of things you want to see more on, and then we would build some time into the next part of next year to work through those topics. Some will be probably fairly short conversations, some may be longer, but that's how I would recommend you proceed.
That sounds perilously close to we have to pass the ordinance to know what's in it.
Do we?
No, it doesn't.
We know what's in it.
We've been working on this for 2 years.
I know.
And it is a detailed ordinance. We're talking about a handful of items that need some more discussion. I think that is, I don't think that's that way at all. So I would take difference. to
Well,
that.
I mean, obviously I'm being a little bit facetious, but in, 30 minutes, less than 10 specific things were brought up. Are you suggesting that we just pass it as it is and then sit around and wait for the things we see coming before we fix them?
Well, there are a number of things that need more discussion than just making a decision on the fly on some of these. That's what I would suggest. Now, there are some very specific items, if you want to take those up. Alderman Peterson talked about a specific change. There's a specific suggestion on one component of the scenic corridor overlay. Okay, you can do those. I would suggest those could be
Okay,
dealt with and understood as a specific concern. But if there's something that has significantly more components to it, a deeper discussion is needed, let's have that deeper discussion. Let's not try to fix it without having that, the benefit of that.
Okay. Thank you.
Say that
I
we
would-
don't know what's in it. We do know what's in it. We've had it for how long?
Well, I've said before that in 2007, we passed the current zoning ordinance, and the comment was, let's hold off 6 months so we can understand it. Well, the 6 months passed, and we didn't understand it any better after 6 months. So I think at the point that is being made is that it's important to move forward. We're going to find issues that need further detail and further discussion. Many of those have been brought up, and we are going to address those. So we're ready to move on to item 5.
I still think we need to address a couple of those issues before we get down to December the 30th. That's just.
Yeah, absolutely. If you want
Okay.
to make recommendations, make them.
They've been made.
They really haven't, but
Well, okay.
you can.
The issues have been addressed then. All right, so if we need another meeting to make the recommendations to address the issues that we just got to addressing, then have another meeting. But they're not super duper issues. But they are issues that we get calls on, and I've gotten calls on. And it's not just one issue that we've just got through discussing. It's several issues, and I see letters on these, I see memos on these, I get phone calls on these, and guys, we're gonna look at them. I'm almost begging you before December the 30th.
Well, let me give you one example, the floodplain specifically. To try to pull one component and say it does all these things or doesn't do all these things, it's not that simple, folks.
Okay.
There's a lot of components, and that was the primary point that the flood program administrator for the state of Tennessee made to us today. Don't get caught into saying, well, one place does it this way, so that won't affect you very much, or it will affect you a great deal, whatever point you're trying to make, because it's a collective. It has multiple facets to it. And so you got to look at it as a whole. You can't just look at it as, 3 feet versus 1 foot on the elevation component, because there's other elements that go into that rating, other elements that go into how it functions, how it affects insurance rates, so you can just, it's not as simple as dealing with one component of it. That's why I would suggest that we spend more time on that element. We've already made a commitment to revisit look at the whole zoning ordinance after we've had it for 12 months, but there are specific topics, and that's one that deserves more attention. But give it the time it needs so that you can understand the different aspects of it, not just maybe one component you're getting a question on. That's the advice I would offer.
Item 5, consideration resolution 2019-110, a resolution to initiate an application for revision of McKay's Mill PUD development plan on behalf of Ali Himyari, Nashville K-9.
I think this is Alderman Berger's request, so you might want to have her.
Go ahead, Alderman Berger.
Up to me. Anything's going on here.
We need to skip over this item and move to another one.
No, I'm good.
You ready? Let's go.
Just had to shut my book down. All right, so this is request for the use of the old Walgreens abandoned building in McKay's Mill in a PUD. And after talking with staff, they had suggested under the new ordinance to bring this as a request to add a use. No zoning change or anything, just add a use to the development plan. And Greg, I believe you're representing the applicant, so I'm sure that you can go into this. And I'll have a few other things to say as well, but go ahead. If that's okay with the mayor.
Sure.
Sure, thank you. My name is Greg Gamble, and it is a great time for businesses in Franklin, Tennessee right now. However, this Walgreens remains empty. It is available for a business to move into to lease. Walgreens wants to lease it. They have 11 and a half years left on their lease. There's little to no interest in a 24,000 square foot facility. Ali has an excellent use for this building. Right now, it is empty, it's vacant. There's concern in the neighborhood about an increase in traffic if it becomes a retail use again. Ali's proposal is low impact, low traffic use. You'll notice in the front cover, this is the Walgreens building. What you'll see in the Walgreens building is that the windows are high. The vast majority of the building is brick with very little exposure into the building. Ali can operate his business without impact to the neighbors in the local community around. So what are we asking for? Well, this property is in an area in McKay's Mill currently zoned neighborhood commercial. The neighborhood commercial use is in a PUD, and the uses are restricted to retail, office, and apartments. Those are the only three uses that are listed as approved uses within this neighborhood commercial area. Now, there is a veterinarian clinic that is there on site. There's a daycare that's nearby. There's restaurants that are in this. But one definition that we have had issue with, I guess, in the current zoning ordinance is the definition of indoor animal services. Ali will be training dogs specifically that would spend the night in this facility. And by allowing indoor animal services for this purple area in the McKay's Mill PUD, Ali would then be able to occupy this building and operate it for dog training, specifically medical, police dogs. He has some dogs that are actors in movies, but it is really a public service. We're not asking for your approval tonight on the use. We're not asking for your approval tonight on Ali's plans. What we're asking for tonight is for you to give us the opportunity to have this discussion on a more public forum, to have the public meetings, the neighborhood meetings to move forward with. This property is currently owned by a national conglomerate. Walgreens is leasing the space from them. Walgreens has the ability to sublease, but they can't sign an owner's affidavit giving the request to add this use. This use would be applied to all of Section 12, to all of the neighborhood commercial area. Again, the PUD is restricting the uses that are in the PUD very specifically to retail, office, and apartments. So we're asking to add indoor animal services. There's only two ways to initiate a revision of a PUD or a rezoning in Franklin. One of those is the applicant, the owner, requests. The other is for the alderman to agree that to make the request and it move forward. We're asking tonight to not move forward with an owner's affidavit and the owner's request, but to ask the alderman to initiate this request.
Alderman McClendon.
So you're headed towards a PUD amendment.
It is a PUD amendment to add a use.
Okay, so this would not be an amendment of general application in the city of Franklin.
Correct. It's only for this area identified here in purple,
And
Section
what
12.
is the language for how do I know what indoor animal services is, and maybe more importantly, is not?
Well, right now, the closest comparable use is commercial kennels. And that's kind of an outdated term. There are a lot of different animal care facilities out there. So indoor animal care services is simply that. It's any use involving animal services that is indoors. And that's different from indoor-outdoor animal services. There's a noise difference between indoor animal services and indoor-outdoor animal services where there might be dedicated runs or dedicated facilities for animals outdoors. So
But it
indoor
could be-
animal services might be a groomer's, or it might be
A kennel.
A doggy daycare, or it could be overnight boarding. We really saw the differences being whether or not it's enclosed in a building and less noisy versus being outdoors and sound travels with barking dogs.
So, okay, so if we were to make this amendment, we should be prepared to live with a doggy daycare, the traditional concept of a kennel indoor only, a vet, or those kinds of things.
As long as they're indoor only. And this is a PUD, so additional restrictions could be put in the PUD by board and mayor and alderman.
Correct.
Could you
Such as
quickly,
soundproofing.
give us the timeline if the board what is the timeline for approval for what we were trying to do?
If the board initiates the ability to file a development plan on behalf of this applicant, it would go to the planning commission in January and then to the board of mayor and aldermen again, February, March.
And when would we initiate this request for addition to the PUD?
It would be adding the indoor animal care services to the list of permitted uses in the development.
When would we do
You'd vote in
that?
2 weeks on a resolution
That's what I'm asking.
to start the process.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Amari intends to take the lease over from Walgreens. It's a 10-year lease yet, or 11 that you have left?
It's around 10.6, 10.7
Okay,
years.
almost 11. And then he also hopes to purchase the building from the conglomerate in New York once that is accomplished, but he has to get to this step first. We did have a neighborhood meeting, and it was very, very positive. We had one person that was a little negative, but after speaking to them, they understood it more. And another fellow that was fairly new and wanted to know what was going on, but it was all positive comments. We had two commercial realtors there who have, one lady said she's actually had 11 entities look at it, and she cannot lease it. It's, how many square feet is that again?
It's around close to 16,000.
16,000. And it's just too big, and they will not permit it to be broken up to use like, into 2 or 3 or 4 different businesses. So they've been having so many issues, and I will tell you, if Ron Erie was here, I could tell you, he and I talk consistently every 2 to 3 weeks, if not more sometimes, because of the problems we have over there with that building being vacant. So anyway, Commissioner Chad Story was at the meeting, and he asked me, he said, would you like me to write an update on what happened at the meeting? I said, that'd be great. So from his perspective, and took notes. So he wrote up something and posted it for us. And then we had people weigh in on it. And we have over 30-some comments. Every single one of them was positive. And I'm just going to read 3 or 4 of them real quick. I don't think anyone could ask for anything better than this, especially when we realize this is already zoned for retail and retail area. This proposal is very has little consumer traffic and close to zero for deliveries and big trucks. Boy, sounds like a win-win for our subdivision. I fully support this business. It brings low traffic. Thank you. National Canine Training increases even police presence here. Hard to beat that, especially with long-term lease and limited traffic. The other few, soundproofing, will soundproofing be done? Yes, soundproofing will be done. I think you said the same that is put into theaters. So when you're going to a theater, you're not hearing the next theater right there close to you. We certainly support this, given the growth, as well as this business type. Sounds like an ideal tenant to us. We're grateful. Thank you. So, and go on and on. I won't read the rest of them, but they're very, very positive. And we not had one negative comment on that. And I do believe that you took time to walk twice, door to door, or into all the surrounding streets of that node.
That's correct.
And how was it?
Overwhelmingly positive.
Yeah.
People are excited to have us.
Yeah.
Alderman Barnhill.
Thank you.
The 2 weeks gives you the time that you need to get whatever neighborhood meeting that you need to have, that you probably have already had, but it needs to get, do you have enough time to do what you need to do on that?
We've completed that process. The next is to the resolution.
I think the concern that I had when it came up several months ago was what the impact was on the neighborhood, so, and how the neighbors were or were not accepting of this. So if you've got those things done, you now have a timeline for 2 weeks from now for an ordinance.
Can we move on? All right. Item 6, Resolution 2019-97, a resolution authorizing the use of competitive sealed bid proposals method for choosing suppliers and service providers specifically for police promotional process, liability, property, and workman's competence insurance, and near-site clinic healthcare services. Any question? Okay. Item 7, procurement award to P&A Administrative Services of Buffalo, New York, and the total fee of $3.20 per participating employee for healthcare and dependent care flexible spending account. Item 8 is a resolution to authorize staff to enter into contract negotiation with select consulting firms for professional design and consulting services for park projects for the Parks Department, basically pre-qualifying providers.
In various categories.
In various categories. Item 9, agreement for Oak Brook PUD between the City of Franklin and Thompson Thrift Development in the amount of $383,000 for the parkland impact fee. Next is 10, consideration of contract 2019-311 with Community Housing Partnership for the receipt of community development block grant funds from the City of Franklin as reimbursement for costs associated with construction of single-family homes that benefit low to moderate income residents. Basically, this is an update and a tweaking of a contract. Item 11 is Resolution 2019-113, a resolution authorizing the city administrator and city attorney to finalize the acquisition of property located at 109 Battle Avenue, 111 Battle Avenue for the 100 block Battle Avenue drainage improvements. Alderman Peterson.
Just one question. I thought that the Stormwater Fund did not have money available for projects. Other than that, I'm okay. I'm okay.
Yeah, there's sufficient funds for that project.
Okay.
This is one of your last ones that has funding available.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I thought at one time this was somewhat less or considerably less than the 2.5 million or so. If I remember, I was thinking it was like 1.8 or something or other. And again, I think I requested that the last time we had this, that we take another look at the appraisal on those homes. So we got those homes appraised at, was it 700,000 and 500,000? And how did we go about the appraisal, and who did the appraisal of those homes?
We had two firms that did the appraisals, one that did the initial one, and then the second appraisal that we had to update it because there'd been so many, I guess it's been about a year, was a different appraisal company. I can't remember their exact name. Ben's here, who really would like to know it. But actually, the second appraisals took the values up even higher. The valuation was based on sales in the area. As a matter of fact, one house just sold 2 doors down, and these are right in line with the price per square foot of what they actually appraised at.
So what was the price per square foot?
I don't have that detail. I do have the full appraised value of it in the memo, which I can get into if you'd like, but it's based on.
Don't worry.
Yeah, I mean, we don't typically pick the numbers.
So is my memory serving me correctly, was it less than that? Considerably less?
Yes.
Was it like, something like 1.8 when we first started entering into this?
Yes.
And it's now 2.5.
Yeah, the appraisals
And based upon the increased appraisal and value of the 2 homes that we're buying?
That's part of it, yes, sir.
Part of it.
But there's a house literally 2 houses down. It's the same price per square foot as these, and it just sold within the last 2 months or month. And it's shocking to me as well. And what I've been told, even by our right-of-way acquisition agent and the appraiser, because we questioned this, is that this downtown historic market is a very unique market, and what people are paying per square foot is unbelievable.
But pay 2.5 to tear down 2 is.
With that money, we're also building the 2.5 is the cost of construction for the detention facility.
So does it drain the water off the other side of the street? Because the water stands on the other side of the street.
Yeah, we're gonna work with those property owners, to be able to do that long-term, and that's part of the intention of the project. Yes, sir.
Item 12, procurement award to 360 Network Solutions of Marietta, Georgia, in total amount of $38,391.93 for access security components for traffic signals, basically a locking system for the signal cabinets. Item 13, a resolution of support of a 911 surcharge rate restoration and requesting support of the Tennessee General Assembly.
So this would restore, this is a resolution of support to restore a 911 rate that the voters passed in 2012, and then the state legislature acted in a way that rolled some of that back. And the county commission, Brentwood's Board of Commissioners, and now you've been asked to put your support behind this. This would generate about $500,000 of additional revenue per year to our 911 district, which includes the county and Franklin, and help support what we do in terms of the communication center and other elements of our 911 system.
Item 14, Resolution 2019-58, to increase the hourly rate for extra-duty police officers and to authorize use of patrol cars for extra-duty work when requested or for special events.
We haven't touched this in about 7 years, and it would increase it about $10 per hour for both officers and supervisory officers. The user pays that, so, yeah, so somebody who has special detail at their event, they pay that directly for those services.
They pay it directly to the police officer?
Well, that's a good question. It really works better if it's paid through the city than back out to the officers. Right now, it's being paid directly to the officers. That's an administrative issue that
So are we
we're working
addressing
on.
that in this?
You're really
And-
you're addressing the rate.
And the use of the police car.
Yeah, it
So
covers
how do
all
they-
that, and we better protect everybody if it runs through the city in terms of insurance, et cetera.
So if the rate is $45 an hour and the policeman is 35, would the city then keep 10 an hour for use of the police car?
There's a $10 administrative element of that. It's $45 plus I think it's $5, isn't it, administrative fee? Yeah. So that $5 goes towards some of the administrative costs.
Item 15, consideration Tennessee 1033 Law Enforcement Support Office program provides new, unissued, and surplus equipment and materials to participants at no charge.
So we pay $1,000 and get the opportunity to get free surplus equipment and materials. Yeah.
Okay, items 16 or 17 are awards as far as sewer main rehabilitation and lateral rehabilitation services. Everybody okay with that? And then 18 is, we've seen this before, is a consideration procurement award to Polydyne of Riceboro, Georgia, in a total amount of $1.26 per pound of bid chemical product, an estimated amount of $11.97 per ton of dewatered sludge for supply and delivery of sludge polymer for wastewater sludge dewatering. Okay, now we're going to a fluoride addition to potable water for distribution of the City of Franklin service area. Alderman Berger.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask this be deferred till January because we're running late tonight?
To
and I think-
January?
Yeah, I think this can wait.
January it is.
Thank you.
We'll see
January,
in-
second meeting in January.
Second
would be
meeting in
fine.
January.
Works.
Okay, we'll
Yeah,
see you in
it's fine.
15 minutes.